Hello GPT. In which month in which year is your training data cutoff? My training data cutoff is 2021. Since the start of the COVID pandemic, a new phenomena called long COVID has appeared, which is still a new topic and a lot of research is going on. Can you give a brief overview what you know about long COVID and how it is related to the virus and the vaccine? Long COVID refers to a phenomenon where individuals experience ongoing symptoms after recovering from the initial acute phase of COVID-19 infection. It is also referred to as post-acute sequelae of SARS-CoV-2 infection. PASC. Some common symptoms of long COVID include fatigue, shortness of breath, brain fog, and muscle aches. The exact cause of long COVID is unknown, and researchers are still studying it to determine the underlying mechanisms and factors that contribute to it. It is not yet clear if long COVID is related to the severity of the initial infection or if it is more common among certain groups of people. There is also no evidence that suggests that the COVID-19 vaccine causes long COVID. Further research is needed to understand the relationship between long COVID and both the virus and the vaccine. There are some studies showing that long COVID is considered an autoimmune disease, where an overproduction of pro-inflammatory molecules causes harm to the body. Please give a brief overview. Which underlying mechanisms of signaling are involved in triggering the overproduction and relate to other diseases, where this underlying mechanism is apparent in a similar fashion but may be triggered in a different way. The underlying mechanisms of long COVID are not fully understood, but there is some evidence to suggest that it may be related to an overproduction of pro-inflammatory molecules in the body. This overproduction is thought to trigger a persistent immune response, leading to ongoing symptoms. This phenomenon of an overactive immune response is also seen in other autoimmune diseases, such as rheumatoid arthritis and lupus. In these diseases, the immune system mistakenly attacks the body's own tissues, leading to chronic inflammation and tissue damage. The exact mechanisms that trigger the overproduction of pro-inflammatory molecules in long COVID and other autoimmune diseases are not yet clear, but they are thought to involve dysregulation of immune signaling pathways. These pathways help to regulate the immune response and prevent overactivation. But in autoimmune diseases they can become dysregulated, leading to chronic inflammation and tissue damage. Further research is needed to better understand the underlying mechanisms of long COVID and its relationship to autoimmune diseases and other chronic inflammatory conditions. Particularly two receptors called ACE2 and CD147 are assumed to be involved in the COVID infection and long COVID cases. Please give a brief overview about those two receptors and relate each one of them to its role in the virus replication during an infection and in the dysregulation of immune signaling pathways in a long COVID case. ACE2 and CD147 are two receptors that have been implicated in the biology of SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19, and in the development of long COVID. ACE2 is a cell surface receptor that is the primary entry point for SARS-CoV-2 into human cells. The virus binds to ACE2 on the surface of cells and uses it to gain entry into the cell, allowing it to infect the body. The expression of ACE2 is increased in certain tissues, such as the lung and heart, making these tissues particularly susceptible to COVID-19 infection. CD147, also known as Basigan, is a cell surface receptor that is involved in immune signaling and the regulation of immune responses. CD147 has been shown to play a role in regulating pro-inflammatory signaling pathways and has been implicated in the pathogenesis of autoimmune diseases. Some studies have suggested that CD147 may also be involved in the development of long COVID, as it has been shown to be upregulated in individuals with persistent symptoms after COVID-19 infection. Further research is needed to fully understand the roles of ACE2 and CD147 in COVID-19 and long COVID, and to determine the exact mechanisms by which they contribute to these conditions. How common are the ACE2 and the CD147 receptor with respect to the working mechanisms in other viruses? Do other viruses also cause damage using the mechanisms based on the ACE2 and the CD147 receptor? Or is it more common that other viruses make use of ACE2 or CD147 only? Please name some important examples and give a brief overview. The ACE2 receptor is primarily used as an entry point for SARS-CoV-2 and related coronaviruses into human cells. Other viruses, such as human rhinoviruses, have also been shown to use ACE2 as a receptor, but it is not widely used by many other viruses. The CD147 receptor is not typically used as a direct entry point by viruses, but its role in regulating immune responses makes it a potential target for viruses that seek to evade or suppress the host immune response. CD147 has been implicated in the pathogenesis of various viral infections, including dengue virus, human immunodeficiency virus, HIV, and hepatitis B virus, HBV. In the case of dengue virus, CD147 has been shown to play a role in the regulation of immune responses to the virus and has been implicated in the development of severe dengue disease. In HIV infection, CD147 has been shown to play a role in the regulation of immune responses and has been linked to the development of AIDS. In HBV infection, CD147 has been shown to play a role in regulating immune responses to the virus and has been implicated in the development of liver disease. These examples highlight the potential role of CD147 in regulating immune responses to viral infections and the implications for the development of disease. Further research is needed to fully understand the mechanisms by which CD147 is involved in these and other viral infections. We conclude that the COVID virus has a unique property because it uses ACE2 for entry into human host cell and also the CD147 receptor. However, the CD147 is not used as a direct entry point by the virus, but for the dysregulation of immune signaling pathways in the long COVID cases. Is COVID the only no virus that uses both of the mechanism for host cell infection and for triggering pro-inflammatory signaling pathways? How do symptoms differ between long COVID and other viruses or diseases which use the mechanism of CD147 for causing harm? SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19, is unique in its use of both ACE2 as an entry point into human cells and CD147 as a potential contributor to the dysregulation of immune signaling pathways in long COVID cases. To the best of my knowledge, No other virus uses both of these mechanisms in the same way as SARS-CoV-2. The symptoms of long COVID can differ from those of other viruses or diseases that use the mechanism of CD147 for causing harm. Long COVID is characterized by persistent symptoms, such as fatigue, shortness of breath, brain fog, and muscle pain, which can persist for weeks to months after acute COVID-19 infection. In contrast, other viral infections or autoimmune diseases that involve dysregulation of the immune system may have different symptoms, depending on the specific virus or disease. It is important to note that long COVID is still a new and evolving topic, and much is still unknown about its causes and symptoms. Further research is needed to fully understand the mechanisms behind long COVID and how it differs from other viral infections or autoimmune diseases.